You're listening to Wanderlust Diaries, the ultimate travel podcast for solo female travellers 40 and beyond who are ready to explore the world. Join me, Terri Reynolds, where we talk all things travel and why it's so important and what's stopping you from getting out there and exploring the world. We'll discuss the steps you can take now to fix it, empowering you to ignite your curiosity and set your heart free so that you have the confidence to travel wherever you want, whenever you want. Offering insights, tips, hacks, and remarkable women's stories along the way. So come on, grab your passport, pack your sense of adventure, and get ready to be inspired. Whether you're a first-time solo traveller or a seasoned globetrotter, Wanderlust Diaries is your community of like-minded souls, uplifting and supporting women over 40 who dare to explore. This week's episode of Wanderlust Diaries, and today I am joined by Risa August, who is a Gestalt practitioner, creativity connection coach, mindfulness-based CBT therapist, an igniter of dreams, which I absolutely love, and an award-winning author of The Road Unpaved. And all of this we can go into as we go along. So thank you so much for joining me. I feel very privileged that you're joining me today. So thank you so much, Risa. It's lovely to have you here. And so just over to you, really. Tell us a little bit about you before we actually get into it.
Sure. Well, Terri, I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you so much. Yes, what can I tell about? Well, I'm based in Colorado, in the US. Love to travel any chance I get. And gosh, I want to embrace life fully. So I'm doing and trying all kinds of things in this kind of second phase of my life.
And I love that. I love the way you call it your second phase of your life. So obviously travel's a big part of your life. But I think it would be great, especially for the listeners, to understand where that comes from and, you know, your life as it is at the moment. And, you know, you do focus on the power of transformative power of removing limiting beliefs, which I absolutely love and absolutely agree with. And maybe we can touch a bit on that, especially for those listening who are thinking of traveling, but a little bit anxious, a little bit, you know, not sure they really want to. And they're thinking about what's holding me back. And maybe we can touch on some of that stuff as we go along. So start from the beginning then. So tell us what ignited your passion for travel in the first place.
Sure. Yeah. I'd have to say, I actually, as a child, was always fascinated with other cultures. And I think this was part of my father's influence. He loved history. He was so knowledgeable about other people, other places. And I was always fascinated by it. And so fast forward to my early 20s, I had an opportunity to move to another state from the state I grew up in. And that just opened the floodgates. I was like, wait a minute, there's life outside of Ohio in the United States. And I, ever since I moved, and that state happened to be Maine, which is up on the northeastern coast. And ever since then, I was like, okay, well, if there's this, there's got to be other stuff. And so then I moved to the West Coast, and then I moved to Australia, and it just kind of kept going from there.
And what were the drivers for those moves? You know, like you say, you went over to the East, up to Maine first, I think you said. So what were the drivers for going there? Was it a job, or was it just literally traveling?
It actually was a boyfriend. And it's interesting because, you know, the relationship with the boyfriend didn't work out, but I didn't care. You know, reflecting back, it was actually, he was the catalyst for this kind of new evolution of self, I guess. Like he opened me up to so many new things and seeing just this small part of the world that led me to seeing more parts of the world. And so that was kind of the driving force for that. And but then I just wanted to keep going from there.
There was no stopping you. It's like, right. Was it
Yes.
a case of like stick a pin in the map and wherever it lands, that's where I'm going next? Or was there a little bit of planning?
Well, I was in my early 20s and kind of figuring out, what next, what now, what am I doing, who am I in the world, and all that. So, but I financially, I had to kind of fund my travel, my desire to travel. So I would actually find seasonal work in locations that I wanted to explore. And and so it was always these jobs, these seasonal jobs that kind of led me from one place to the next.
So they were the catalyst. That was a means to an end. So the job was to fund your traveling in the first place and to keep you going.
Yes, definitely.
Love it. Yes. And so, okay, so you said you ended up going to Australia as well. So how far into your traveling were you that you ended up going to the other side of the world, essentially?
Oh gosh. Yeah, I was probably about 4 or 5 years into this, like, oh my gosh, moment from that first time I moved with the boyfriend and then ended up in Australia. And my friend just happened to tell me about an internship for environmental education in Australia, South Australia. And I was like, I'm going. And I kept coming up against like little roadblocks, maybe being shy, just a little bit of money for the visa, or maybe not being able to get the timing right or something. Like it just kept, but I persevered. I was so determined to go, and it ended up working out
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. It's like face the fear and do it anyway.
Exactly.
And I can relate to the shyness because as a youngster I was very shy. I've gotten over it as I've gotten older, but there are still times when I do get a little bit like that. So, but how did you cope with that though? You're saying that you were a little bit shy, so I'm guessing that you were a bit reticent to maybe speak to others or like fully immerse yourself into maybe the community or what was going on immediately.
Yeah. So, gosh, I think my desire for adventure and exploration and life experiences really kind of overtook the shyness, overtook maybe the mental blocks, or things that I might have been kind of making these opportunities more challenging for me to obtain. But I was so determined. I just wanted to see and do as much as I could in the world. And
And did you think, because I know for me, I was 39 the first time I went traveling. And for me, yes, I'd have those feelings of anxiety. I'd be scared, be thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do what if nobody talks to me? What if I what if I can't find my way around? But I tell you what, for me, it was that feeling of if I didn't go was worse than the terror I was feeling of, going into the unknown. And those emotions and those feelings, they wouldn't last long at all. But now and again, they'd just come over me. All of a sudden I'd have a bit of a moment and I'd be like, okay, then who do you think you are? You're not 19 or 20 now, you can't just go off backpacking around the world for a year on your own. I mean, so I'd have those kinds of moments. And did that kind of thing ever hit you?
yes. But first I want to say, like, I love what you said. It so resonates with me, where if I didn't do it, like I would always be wondering, or always like, well, what if I what if I had done that, or what? And so I love what you said about that, because that I can say, yeah, that too was a driving force. And then the more I kept doing it, the more I was like, okay, now I know what it gets me. So now I know if I do it, oh, now I know what it gets me, as opposed to what if I'm missing out? It's like, well, but I know what I'm going to get. But yes, I actually just recently had an experience like you were talking about. I was going to Spain for a month, and all these questions of like, oh my gosh, what if I'm not in enough good enough shape? I don't know the language very well. Like, I mean, there was just all these reasons of like, why should I be doing this? I'm focusing on my career or this or that. Like, there was just so many reasons I could come up with for not to do it. But I remember getting to that point of, but if I don't, I'll always wonder. I'll always be like, what am I missing out on? What opportunities did I miss? What experiences did I miss? And so,
Yeah, and that's the worst feeling, isn't it?
yes,
You
it
know,
sure
that's the
is.
worst. Yeah, no, it's exactly. You know, regret the things you have and not the things you haven't. And yeah. So you say you went to Spain for a month recently. So were you traveling around Spain? I went to Spain a couple of weeks ago, and I was kind of on the mainland there only for a week, but it was just so lovely to be there. A friend has a villa there, so then they let me go and stay. So you went for a month, and what was the purpose? Was it just literally, were you traveling around? Was it working as well as traveling?
Yeah, well, the answer to this is a little layered, but you and I actually might have been there during the same time. I I
Oh, I
was
hope
diagnosed.
not. I hate the thought that we were both there and we couldn't meet. We didn't meet. I mean,
I
that's oh, we were so close because we're both from different continents, and it would have been amazing to have met up with you. But anyway,
Yes, it doesn't mean we won't get the opportunity in the future. So,
true, true.
um, well, I in 2018 I was diagnosed with a tumor at the base of my brain and a rare disease, and this was a real shift and turning point in my life. And I pulled out my bucket list and I started looking at all the things I wanted to do in my life. In my early to late 20s, I traveled a lot, and I was, the world was my oyster. And then I settled down, and all of a sudden, like 15 years went by, and I'm like, wow, where did my life go? And I haven't done all these things. And so all of a sudden I'm looking at my life again, and I'm like, wow, there's still so much on this list of things I want to do. And so that's kind of where it started. And so anyways, the Camino to Santiago in Spain, in northern Spain, was on my list, and that's what took me there. And I physically, I can't walk that far, nor do I have that much time to take off work for that. But I can bike, I can still ride my bike. And so I decided I was going to bike for 15 days along the Camino, from Roncesvalles to Santiago, which is about approximately 500 miles. Yeah, or maybe it's 740 kilometers. I'm not good at the math with that.
No, me. It's okay. That's amazing to do that. So, what you've overcome and then gone on to do is, it's fantastic, really, because a lot of people, they would just give up, really, unfortunately, and think, well, this is my life now. So I love the fact that you're literally taking the bull by the horns and you're saying and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it anyway. But, for anyone else who's listening that may have some kind of illness, not necessarily the same, but how did you manage that? Because I would imagine you would have to manage this, especially if you're on medication, or like you said, with the, you can't walk very far. And so you have to take all these things into consideration when you're doing something like that, you know. So what kind of what kind of management did you put in place, you know, so that by step you had everything there so that you knew that you would be okay?
Yes, gosh. Well, again, it started with making a conscious decision of life's meant to be lived, you know, life's for living. And I stopped focusing, you know, because I used to be an Ironman athlete and I did a lot of triathlons and, you know, mountain climbing. And
I noticed that. I was reading your website and there's a whole list, and I was going to talk about this later, but you've brought it up. There's a whole list. So listeners, if you go on to Risa's website and about her, at the bottom, there's this whole list, 16 bullet points, I counted, of what she's actually achieved. It's fantastic. And an Ironman 3 times, wasn't it?
yeah. So, and so I, you know, I'm not saying it was like a flip of the switch. I had to grieve that part of self I was losing, but I also had to start embracing who I was and who I wanted to be moving forward. And so I stopped focusing on what I could no longer do and who I no longer was, or the identity I had created for myself. And I started asking myself, well, who am I now? And who do I want to be? And I feel myself getting emotional thinking about it. And so I started looking at all the things I still love to do, and just started thinking of ways I can still do them, but I might have to make some adjustments or shift my perspective around it, you know? And so, again, for example, on the Camino, typically people hike it. And I know I physically can't do that anymore, but I'm like, but I can still bike with minimal pain. And I was like, so I'm going to do it. And that's how I kind of approach every situation now. I also, this change opened me up to so many other things now too. Like I was so rigid and like, this is who I am and this is what I do. And now I'm like, wait a minute, I've expanded. Like this is who I am and this is all the stuff I do. And it just opened me up to so much more in life. And again, it gave me back that desire to experience other cultures and people and communities and countries. And so now I have, you know, it's kind of re-sparked that in me again.
I absolutely love that. And you can see that in you. You can see it in your face. When you're talking about that, your face lights up and you can see it. And I guess it's a case of you have to compromise and improvise. You know, there are things that you still can do. You just can't do them the same way you used to, you know. So we're not giving up here. No way. We are going to find, and it's like a workaround, isn't it? You know, if you're in work and the computer suddenly plays up, what's the workaround? You know, it's usually plan B, go back to paper. but you know, it is about that, isn't it? It's about finding a way that suits you so that you can live your life and not just sit there thinking, well, I can't do it now, I can't do that anymore. Well, hell to that, you know, I will find my way of doing it.
Exactly. What, you know, ask yourself, what can I do, as opposed to what, focusing on what you can't do. And I think you can understand this too, is like, you can't go into any trip, you know, without knowing that it might not go flawlessly. Like there might be glitches, you know. For example, I have to keep my medication cold. I take in daily injections, and so I had to contact every single hotel or place that I was staying and make sure they had refrigerators for me to use. And a couple times they didn't. And so, you know, I had to get creative and, you know, think of things, and, you know, and it worked out fine. And it's not always easy.
You know, exactly that. And that's what I was saying at the top about, you know, you have to manage what it is you're going to do. And you're right about curveballs, because no matter how well you plan something, you can plan A to B down to the nth degree, but you will always, I don't care who you are, where you're going, what type of trip it is, there will always be, it may not be a massive curveball or a glitch, but that something will not go as well as you planned. So what you have to do, literally, is just pivot, and just think of, right, okay, I can't do it that way. So how can I do it then?
Yes, beautifully said. Yes, well said. Yeah, absolutely.
Because otherwise you can't just give up on your trip, can you? Just because something didn't go your way. It's like, I don't know if I spoke to you about this before when we had a chat, but or maybe I've said it on a previous podcast, so please forgive me if I'm repeating myself. But when I went around the world, I was meant to go to Fiji, and what happened was there was a coup, and so they told me I couldn't go. They said they could get me on the island, but they couldn't promise how to get me, if they could get me back off again. And I thought, is that a bad thing, really? Maybe I just stay there. So and so it's like, right, what do I do now then? So you just think about something else, a different way around it, because there's no way I was thinking, well, what do I do now? I'll just go home, is there, if I can't go there? That's not going to happen. So you do literally have these things thrown at you, and it may not be as big as what I've just said, but you just find your way around, don't you? And the more you travel, would you agree with this as well? The more you travel, the more you kind of expect something to go wrong. So therefore, you're better prepared of just accepting it.
Right, absolutely. And sometimes in that going wrong, it's actually ends up being very right.
Absolutely. It doesn't, it's not very often that it works out that it's absolutely awful. I mean, I ended up in Hawaii.
I was going to ask you, so tell me about Fiji. What happened?
Yeah, so they offered me a flight to Hawaii. So I said, oh, okay then.
Not bad at all.
Yeah. So I spent a few weeks in Hawaii, which is absolutely gorgeous, away from the touristy bit and that. So yes, so all was not lost. And ever since, I've told myself I need to go back to Fiji. I still haven't been, so it's still on my bucket list, ready to do, so I will get there one day.
Yes. Oh my
gosh. Okay, so with Australia, how long were you in Australia, and did you travel around?
I was there for a year, and I didn't travel as much as I would have liked to. On an intern's wage, I wasn't making a lot of money, and I was working a lot of the time. So, but I did travel around a little bit to the East Coast, like Sydney and the Blue Mountains.
Oh yes.
But one of my favorite places was Kangaroo Island off of
South. Yes.
I just loved it there.
Yes, absolutely gorgeous. I did. I was in Australia for about 6 months, and I did the Whitsundays. Just went up all the way up the East Coast, and then came down the middle. But yes, I had the best time of my life there, in Australia. And I think that, it's so vast. You see it on a map and you think, there's Sydney, there's Melbourne. It's not that far away, really. 3 days later. Well, no, it's not that bad. But you know what I mean? It's just, you can't, I couldn't anyway, coming from the UK, where we're just a small island, and it's just, you get everywhere within one day, and so it was, I just loved it. And I think you were right about that. You were an intern, so you didn't have loads of money, but you made the most of the area that you were in and went off to see, and visit those sites that were available to you.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So, yes. And I think that's how in my 20s, that's kind of how I did it. I was like, okay, well, what can I access with what I have? And so, yeah, and it worked out well. I got to see and do so much.
Yeah, fantastic. And so you were there for, did you say a year then? Was it a year you were there for? So what was your next step after that? And so before we move on, actually, so you were in a brand new country, a totally different culture to what you were used to. But obviously, you know, we all speak English, but we all have our own ways of speaking English for a start. You know, the UK, America, Australia, we all say we speak English, but we've all got different derivatives of it, haven't we? And I just love the Australians. I found them really friendly, you know, fun, really welcoming, and quite a bit of banter with them as well, which I love, because I love a bit of sarcasm and a little bit of banter. And I found them really welcoming. And how did you find being in that country? Did you get homesick at all while you were away?
Oh, I definitely got homesick. Yes, everyone was real friendly. I actually met several when I was traveling over there. I met a lot of people, young people from the UK, and they were very welcoming and like, let's travel together. And so that was lovely. I definitely like. I definitely got homesick. It's everything. It's the food. It's, you know, where I where I was living, you had to kind of keep an eye out for bears, or you might see deer in the wilderness. And here I'd go jogging in the morning or something, and there'd be a giant kangaroo. And I'd, you know, get startled, and the kangaroo would get startled, or, you know, so there was all kinds of things, lots of venomous, dangerous stuff over there that I had close encounters with. But I remember going to a grocery store, and I was like, oh, yum, raisins. I've been missing raisins. So I get this box of raisins, but they were sultanas. And they taste very different. And I was like, these aren't raisins.
Oh, yes. I mean, isn't it strange how we crave the foods that we're so used to eating, even though you just really welcome in the different foods that you're of the country that you're going into, because you know, what's the point otherwise? But at the same time, it's like, oh, because I'm obviously, Cadbury's is our chocolate in the UK, and they had Cadbury's over there, but it just didn't taste the same. You know, it just didn't taste the same. And so there were things like that. But, you know, I found new luxuries, things like Tim Tams. Things like
that. Yes, I remember those. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I loved pasties.
Yes.
The hen pies. Yes. Oh, those were so good.
Yes. Oh, yes. I love a pasty. Oh, gosh. Yes. But yeah, so it's nice, isn't it, to embrace how others live, what they eat, and all the rest of it, but you still get that homesickness. I can remember I was in India. I was about 6 weeks in, 4 to 6 weeks in, I think, of being away. Because for the first couple of weeks, it's okay, isn't it? Because it's like you're on holiday, you know,
yes,
exactly. 2, 3, 4 weeks. It's like you're on holiday, you know, and you could be going home. You haven't had enough time to really miss everybody at that point. And then you get to a certain point where, you know, you get that knotted pit in your stomach of like, and there's nothing you can do about it. You know, I was thinking, oh, could you like just beam me up, transport me home, just to have a cup of tea with everybody? So British, have a cup of tea with everybody, see everybody, and then I know I want to come back. You know, because I knew that if I went home, that's it. You know, I wouldn't be able to come back if I just decided to get a flight. So I knew that straight away I'd want to come back. So I thought, I've just got to try and work my way through this, you know, and haven't you just got to live through it.
Yes. Yeah. And it's, you know, back in my 20s, you know, we didn't have the luxury of the Zoom or Google Meet or video conferencing. And we barely had email back then, I feel. So now, maybe it makes it a little easier. I don't know. Maybe that's not true, but but that is nice to have. At least you can get in contact back home on video.
Absolutely, you know, and I'm like you, because I went in 1999, 2000.
Yeah.
So, that really prehistoric. And it was, I just made an email address for myself, and that was in India. One of the guys in India said, I'll create one for you. So he did that for me. But of course, there were no mobile phones, especially not in the sense that we know them now, that you can take them around the world with you, and you can call home from wherever you are, and you've got FaceTime and all the rest of it. I mean, it's amazing now what you've got at your fingertips. But back then, do you remember the phone cards? And there were like a gazillion numbers on there, and you had to punch the numbers in. And if you got a number wrong, and you had to start again. Oh, the times I slammed the receiver down.
I forgot about those. Yes, I remember.
Oh, the joys.
Those are definitely like gold back then. Yep.
It was, wasn't it? It was painful, and you buy this card and you think, oh, I got to do this. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do this. But it was the dread of, I'm going to go really slowly, make sure I get the numbers correct.
Exactly. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
So that was Australia for you then. So you were a year then. What was your next step? Where were you off to next?
I ended up going back to Maine, which was the place where it all started.
Yeah.
And it was fun seeing that with new eyes. But eventually, I was on the West Coast, in Washington State, and I went to Europe for a few weeks and traveled around just a little bit, England, Dublin, and France, like as much as I could get in like 3 weeks and on my budget.
Yeah.
And so
people, I think some people make the mistake of, I've got 3 weeks, I want to see it all, and then you go in and you try and you just, it's non-stop for those 3 weeks. Yes. But for me, I learned from that you can't soak it all in. You can't really take it all in. It's like whistle stop, isn't it? And you're there for an hour, then you're on to something else for an hour. And I think trying to cram it all in is a bit of a mistake, really, and to kind of take as much time as you can, as much as you want to see everything, choose a few places that you want to visit and really take it in.
Yes, I totally agree with you. That's what I did in Spain. I went like 4 or 5 days early and spent time in San Sebastian on the coast, and then did my Camino ride for 15 days and then stayed 4 or 5 days in Madrid. And in the past, I probably would have tried to get to Barcelona and then down to, I think it's Sevilla. And,
Seville.
I would have tried to do it all. And I was like, no, I can always come back.
Yes. Yeah, this is it, isn't it? It's just making that time to come back, because I keep saying that about Kerala in India, and 20 odd years later, I will get there. I know I will get there, but I never made it while I was in India. So it's like, this is somewhere I really want to go.
Right. And it's hard because there's so many places to see. And so I get caught up in like, okay, I'll get back there, but I still want to go here.
I know. And the thing is, like I say, I backpacked around the world for a year, but I didn't go to every country in that year, because they just, and I pulled my hands up. I did stay for 6 months in Australia because I just loved it so much. And then when my 6 months visa was up, it was like, right, you've got to go now. So that's when I went. But I just loved it. It was fantastic. And I just think, with travel as a whole, I think it's about the transformation as well, isn't it? When you come back from traveling, it's what you've learned and what you want to do from there. So for me, after I'd been away for that year, I took a career break from work because I work for the NHS in the UK. They let me have a career break, which was great. And so I went back to my job, but I knew I couldn't just go back to my job. And I ended up going to university. So I was a very late starter. I hadn't gone, as a youngster, because I got married very young and had a family. And so I went to uni, and got my degree in education, did a PGCE, so I could teach and all of that stuff, which then took me down a different path, because I was a medical secretary, a PA to a consultant urologist. And so I knew the transformation for me was that I knew I wanted something different in my life. I didn't want to come back and just live the same life. So what would you say the transformation was for you?
Yes. Well, and before I go there, I want to speak to a little bit of what you said. Like I feel like all the experiences I have, and maybe this is good for our listeners to hear, like whether things went flawlessly and smoothly or not, to me, I embrace all the experiences. Like I'm grateful for all of them. Like Spain, the Camino was actually extremely difficult and challenging for me. I can't say my heart was excited and bursting each day. Some days were big challenges, but looking back, I'm so grateful for the experience. I can't imagine not having that experience. So yeah. So I was going to connect that to what you were saying somehow, but I forgot.
It'll probably come back to you a bit later. But yeah, it's about there, no matter where you go or when you go. Like I did that big trip. That was my first big trip. I'd never really been abroad. I'd only been once before with a friend. And every trip since, subsequent trip, you always learn something from it, and it always makes you a little bit stronger, gives you a little bit more confidence about whatever it is. I find that the more you do it, for me as well, the more I do it, the more I want to do it.
Yes, it's like I collect more pieces of me or knowledge of me as I travel. Like how someone might collect seashells on the seashore. Like everywhere I go, it's like, yeah, I take a little piece of it with me, and it's a part of my evolution as a human being. I feel so lucky and blessed for.
Yeah. And don't you find as well that every time I go away on my own, I love it. I've got to be honest. I absolutely love it. And I just love that feeling of independence and just whatever takes my fancy in the moment, that day, or whatever it is. Nothing's planned. It's not like it with a group where you've got all these activities arranged, which is great. Don't get me wrong, I think they have their place, and I've been on those as well. But what I'm talking about is when you go on your own, when you are fully solo, it's so liberating, isn't it? And I think that you can't, for somebody who hasn't been, for somebody who really wants to do it and hasn't been yet and done it, you can't pass that feeling on. It's something you have to do yourself to actually feel that almost liberation.
It is so true. I feel like the experience is fuller on my own. For example, on the Camino, I rode with someone for a couple of days. We had just met on the route, and so we decided to ride together for a couple of days. And I noticed I didn't stop as much to take photos or to enjoy the towns and villages we went through, because I felt I didn't want to hold this other person up. And so you can even see on my photo album in my phone, like there's less photos on those days, and then the other days it's just like photo on every corner. And so so what have I missed out? On the flip side of that, I'm so grateful for the connection and meeting this person, and so I can see the value in both.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I agree with that. And when you do solo travel as well, you have the option. You can either be with people or you can be on your own, and there were a lot of times where I just wanted my own space. And now and again, I book into a hostel, I book a single room just for myself, because of course I was sharing dorms then, there could be up to 30 of us in one room sometimes, depending where I was. But but that was the beauty of it, it was a case of I can talk, because I'll just go and talk to anybody, and you can do that. You can be part of a group if you want to, or you can be on your, it just depends what your mood is, isn't it?
Yep, definitely.
And that's what I love about it. You've got the both sides of the coin. So I just love that part of it. But I'm going away with a friend in September, and I'll have a great time with her. So it's not as if the rest of my life I'm just going to solo travel. Thank you very much. It's you just sometimes you just need those times on your own, as well as being with friends as well. And it is nice to share things with friends, isn't it? The times I've been on my own, I thought, I wish so and so was with me now. They'd love it.
Absolutely. Yes. There's definitely both for sure.
Yes.
For sure. And, I've appreciated both at at different times.
Yes. And so I just wanted to mention a few things. I've already mentioned about your website where those 16 bullet points of what else you've done. It's crazy. So listeners, please go and check Risa's website out. I'll put all of your links, Risa, on the within the show notes on the podcast, so everybody can go and have a look. And I read as well that you called your brain tumor Bubba.
Yes.
Any particular reason?
Well, one, I love having a sense of humor, even in some of the hardest, darkest times, which can help get through. I do talk a little bit about how and why Bubba got his name in my book, but it was actually one of my mentors encouraged me to do this. She's in a very holistic realm of therapy, and I was very angry at my body for feeling like it was betraying me, and I'd been so healthy all my life, and all of a sudden I'm like, what? And she said, instead of being angry and mad at your body, why don't you start talking nice to it? Why don't you name your tumor and be like, hey, thanks, you served your purpose, time to go. And so Bubba became a character in himself, and you'll hear some of his dialogue throughout my book.
Right. And again, I shall put the link for your book, because that looks a fantastic read. I haven't read it myself yet, but that looks like a fantastic read. A friend of mine had a benign brain tumor, and she called hers Henry.
I love that.
Yes. So as soon as I read that you'd called it a name, I thought, oh, that reminds me of my friend. So it makes sense, doesn't it, when you can have that conversation with it and ask it politely to leave now. Thank you. Nice to meet you, but time to go.
Exactly.
And so what I wanted to ask you is, with everything that you've been through and that you're going through, and I can't commend you enough. You're really an inspiration. What's your purpose now?
Oh gosh, this question gets me in my heart.
Because obviously, you're a CBT therapist. You're, Gestalt practitioner. You're doing all these things. You're a fitness trainer as well, and a spin instructor. I do spin 3 times a week. You do that as well. So with all of that, all these things that you do, what is your purpose?
First and foremost, waking up and being the best human I could be every day. And being a positive force in the world, a positive example for others of, to not limit themselves, to do the thing they've always wanted to do. And it doesn't have to be a bike ride across northern Spain. It could be taking a cooking class or an art class.
Absolutely.
So living
I love that.
inspired. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And like you said, it doesn't have to be this great big thing, does it? You know, it can just be whatever gives you happiness, joy in your life. It could be just taking a bike ride, you know, it could be anything at all, anything that you really want to do. And so, what would you say? What top 3 tips could you give our listeners who want to obliterate their limiting beliefs?
Oh, I love that word, obliterate. I would first, I created this mantra when I was facing that myself, like, oh my gosh, I can no longer do these things. And I started asking myself, so what can I do? And I took the word can, and I took each letter in the word can, and my mantra became capable, able, now. And so I started asking myself in these moments that I felt challenged or stuck or blocked, what am I capable and able to do now in this moment? What can I do? And
That.
it's just opened up my perspective. Okay, I might not be able to go out and do another Ironman,
Yeah.
but I can take my dog for a walk and he'll be happy and I'll be happy. So ask yourself, yeah, what can you do? And let go of the focusing on what you can't do. Also be open to things you never thought you could do or wanted to do it anyways. I've tried so many new incredible things I've never thought I would. I even took, okay, I'm a little shy saying this, but I even took a dominatrix class.
Oh, right. Wow, that's a little bit different. Oh, tell us more.
Yes. And to me, because I can be timid and shy and not feel very confident in myself. I wanted to learn to be more competent in my body. And I wanted to, I speak on stages. So I wanted to feel like I could have a commanding presence for my audience and get their attention. And so for me, it wasn't necessarily for the bedroom evolution so much as becoming more competent in myself. And so I continue to stay open to new experiences. And again, I just want to go back to what we talked about, what you said. I love the word you used, pivot. Like, so when you do come to a circumstance that didn't go according to plan, just pivot.
Yeah.
Just go a different direction and see where that path or road or direction takes you.
Because it will take you in a different direction. I'll tell you a little story about me from last June, so 2023. I just stopped one day. I just had burnout. I got up at 6:30 in the morning, put my gym kit on, ready to go to whatever I was going to do. I can't remember. And I sat there for 12 hours. I did not move. And I just couldn't do anything. But out of that, I mean, that's a whole other story. But out of that was born this podcast. And I think if that hadn't have happened, as much as I'd always wanted to do one, I've always been interested because I like to talk. So, this is perfect for me. I don't know if I would have actually started one, last year. But there was a 6-week course came up and I thought, I'm just going to do this because it's something I'm really interested in. And it just went from there. And I really do think that if I hadn't have had that burnout, I hadn't just stopped, because I just stopped, and it's only been the last few months really that I've got back into the business side of things that I want to build, So you're right. Out of something that's not so great can come something really good. So, you just have to take those curveballs and pivot with them. So I agree.
My gosh, I love that story. It's amazing. And now here we are.
I know. And now I've met you. I wouldn't have met you if it wasn't for that, So, so I'm grateful for that.
Oh, what a great story. I love that.
Yes, I know. So, it wasn't great at the time because,
Sure.
you
Yeah.
know, it was quite painful, to be honest. And, but here I am, a year later, and talking to you, and my podcast is getting there. I'm getting quite a few downloads and all the rest of it, so I'm loving it. But the best bit for me is just talking to people like you, and talking about our travels and what inspires us, what keeps us going, that type of thing. So, so I really thank you for that, Risa. I think that's a really good place to end our chat. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me today. And for everybody who's listening, all of Risa's details, links to her Instagram, her book, her website, all of that will go into the show notes. So that if you want to contact her, that's how you would. Is there a best way to contact you, Risa?
You can definitely contact me through my website, which is risaaugust.com. And that's Risa, Risa, August, just like the month.com.
Yes, great. And like I said, that will go into the show notes so that everybody's got access to it. Once again, thank you so much. And I really do wish you the best with absolutely everything that you want to do. And we must try and meet up in Spain or somewhere.
Somewhere. I would love that. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me.
No, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
And that concludes this episode of Wanderlust Diaries, celebrating the fearless spirit of solo female travellers who are 40 and beyond. I hope you found inspiration, valuable insights, and a renewed sense of wanderlust. Thank you to all our incredible listeners who have joined us on this exciting journey. Remember, age should never stop your quest for adventure, because the world is waiting for you to explore its wonders. And don't forget to join our community on social media to connect with fellow travellers, and subscribe and review us on your favourite podcast platform. All links are in the show notes. Keep dreaming, keep exploring, and stay fearless. Until next time, this is Terri Reynolds signing off from Wanderlust Diaries. Psst, don't keep me a secret. Please tell your friends and fellow travellers.